Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. Here's what we have in the bulletin. The University Hospital of the West Indies is now overwhelmed with COVID-19 cases. Rifles and pistols seized in major operation out west. And later in sports, reggae boys exit CONCACAF World Cup at semi-final stage. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shamela Pullen. Here are the details. We begin with news that the University Hospital of the West Indies is now experiencing an increase in COVID admissions and deaths. To shed some light on the situation, I'm now joined live by Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Carl Bruce at the University Hospital of the West Indies. Dr. Bruce, thank you for joining us. Dr. Bruce, saying there's an increase in COVID cases is one thing, but put that in perspective for us. Over what period are you seeing an increase?
So, good afternoon, Shamela, and thanks for having us. The last 3 to 4 weeks, we started seeing an increase in the number of cases. We actually got to the point where we had no cases and we had closed our COVID spaces and we were treating other patients, such as patients with chronic non-communicable problems, heart attack, stroke, etc. We have been for the last week admitting each day in admission. We have 18 patients. We have 16 today, and we think we're admitting about a half to two-thirds and sending home the rest of the patients. And unfortunately, over the last few days, we have lost 5 of our patients. They're mainly elderly patients with comorbidities, and that's very significant to us. And so we wanted to come back to the public to tell them what was happening and to ensure that we have due process and that they exercise some caution.
How is the UHWI preparing for a possible spike in COVID cases?
So what we have done is that we have had to reopen the COVID ward. And you will recall when you brought this story to the public, you would have seen our video surveillance and clinical systems. We have dedicated 5 beds now in the medical ICU and another 10 or 12 beds in the COVID ward to ensure that the patients have adequate space. But we have actually reached the limit on those beds. And so we think it's important to say to the public and to our elderly population, not to panic, but to be cautious and to ensure that they put in place measures to protect themselves against COVID, particularly if they were locked away for the last 2 to 3 years or if they didn't get vaccinated. Those of us who are working and on the road and who are vaccinated and boosted, we have some immunity. But those patients who were locked away and didn't get vaccinated, these new variants seem to be cherry picking and selecting them out, and we want them to be cautious.
At the same time, Dr. Bruce, many people believe the virus no longer exists. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I think it's clear that the virus has become endemic, meaning that the virus is out there in the population. Over the last few weeks, you would have seen that the FDA and the CDC had suggested that the variants XBB 1.15 and XBB 1.6 was responsible for 17% and 16% of circulating cases. However, this week you'd have seen the WHO put out bulletins to say EG5 and XBB 23 are becoming a concern globally, and they're seeing increased admissions and death. So I would say follow the data and ensure that we are protecting our loved ones.
And in terms of vaccination,
I still believe that it's important to mitigate and to reduce the significance and the severity of the illness you get from the virus. And so we still have our vaccine center open where you can go and get a booster. And particularly if you are in that vulnerable population where you're elderly and you have comorbidities, we still want to protect you and we still think that you should be boosted.
One final question, Dr. Bruce. The admissions that you're seeing, what percentage of those individuals are vaccinated?
It's difficult to say. We're going to analyze that over the last 4 weeks, but it would appear that, it could be that it's almost 50% are not vaccinated. But the patients who are most severe, who need high flow oxygen, are elderly and they do have significant comorbidities.
Any appeal to the nation at this time?
I think all of us know what to do. We have to be responsible as a country. We know our vulnerable populations. We must protect our parents and our elderly populations, and we must protect those with comorbidities. And in certain environment, I still believe in the clinical environment, in the hospital, we encourage people, we ask people to wear masks. And I think we now know that hand washing and those things are important. So be cautious. And if you get sick, you also have a responsibility to stay home until you're better and to ensure that you're protecting your fellow citizens.
That's all the time we have. Thanks again for joining us, Dr. Bruce, Medical Chief of Staff at the UHWI.
Thanks for having us.
To a developing story now, the Joint Anti-Gang Task Force seized 3 rifles, 4 pistols, and an estimated 200 rounds of various ammunition in Green Pond, St. James in an early morning raid. The police say 3 key members of the notorious Only the Family gang were also arrested. The gang has been on the police's radar for some time now, and we'll have more on this developing story in subsequent newscasts. Is Jamaica's appetite for brands fueling the counterfeit industry? The question comes after $15 million in fake shoes were seized during a police operation recently. Jamila Maitland reports.
It's 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, July 12, and police officers attached to the Counterterrorism and Organized Crime Investigations Branch, CTOC, are at a shoe store in Clock Tower, Halfway Tree, St. Andrew. Brands such as Nike, New Balance, Adidas, but they're all fake.
What you see inside here, and there's a small storeroom upstairs, I would put it probably safely about $15 million, Jamaican dollars worth of goods.
Assistant Superintendent of Police Victor Barrett is head of the Intellectual Property Rights Unit at CTOC. He says the store owner will be charged with the unauthorized use of the company's trademark. The fines, up to $1 million per trademark, or a maximum of 12 months in prison. But why did the police target this location when there are several other stores like it?
So it's not like we target store A, B, C, or D. So just like any crime, there has to be a complainant. So until we get a complaint from a rights holder, whether it be Nike, Adidas, or Puma, or any other brand, until we get that complaint, we don't know which store to go.
An attorney who represents some of the more popular shoe brands was on location inspecting the items. While there, TVJ News observed an unusual sense of compliance with the police. ASP Barrett explained that most times the owners are aware of the risks. But could the country's appetite for brands be fueling the counterfeit industry?
You see a man on the street wearing a Nike, a Gucci belt, and he's saying, Ivan, beg you $100.
ASP Barrett says CTOC will continue to educate the public on the ripple effects of the fake goods on consumers' health and the health of the economy.
You don't want brand Jamaica to be seen as a dumping ground where people just dump all kind of counterfeit goods on us. You know, that affects our international image. You know, and then the tax issues. There's a possibility that funds flow into organized crime. And also there's a possibility too that the scammers are using their funds to place, layer, and convert it into a legit means. In doing that, then it hinges on money laundering.
Jamila Maitland, TVJ News.
The opposition has welcomed the decision for the head of the National Works Agency to directly supervise the South Coast Highway project. Opposition spokesman on transport, Mikhail Phillips, believes this should have been done earlier. He was speaking on TVJ's All Angles. Karen Simpson reports.
The Southern Coastal Highway Improvement Project has been laden with problems. The man now in charge, E.G. Hunter, says the contractors are working out the issues, including the acquisition of land as the project progresses.
The law as it now stands only allows the NLA to deal with the owner of the property. And most of the properties are not occupied by the owner. So the owner is somebody who's in England and the relatives live on the property. And so there has to be one transaction with the owner, another transaction with the occupier.
Will the public see a difference in the pace of the work? That's left to be seen, but opposition spokesman on transport, Mikhail Phillips, believes the NWA CEO should have been in charge of the project 2 years ago when the complaints were mounting.
There are contractors out there crying for over 4 years, in just the manner in how the project has been progressing, in how it is that the consultants that is employed to the government of Jamaica have been handling the project itself. We have contractors who have abandoned their package, and I think in this instance, I think that they, with all good intentions, that the government, we have taken on more than we can manage at the same time.
Prior to the announcement, he says it was unclear who was leading the project.
Even while we had Mr. Hunter and the NWA within Parliament or at a PAC meeting, saying who is in charge, he uses the technical terms to speak about who owns the contract, who has the responsibility, allowing the contractor. But it is just like if you employ a contractor to build your house, and if he's not building it to the satisfaction of which you are happy about, then you're going to intervene in that with that contractor. And the government of Jamaica, be it that the monies come from China Exim Bank, it is a loan to the people of Jamaica.
Carrie Simpson, TVJ News.
It's time for a break. Stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back to the Midday News. The Foreign Affairs Ministry is reporting a reduction in the number of Jamaicans using Central America to enter the United States illegally. Foreign Affairs Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith provided an update at Wednesday's post-cabinet press briefing. She says the country continues to engage with international partners to monitor the movement of Jamaicans.
Of persons transiting Mexico and Panama have reduced because of a very strenuous imposition of mechanisms, I would say, control mechanisms for passage through the Darien Gap in Central America, so that on the U.S.-Panama-Mexico side of cooperation, and including with Belize, the external partners, the transit country partners, and the U.S. have been taking very strong measures which seem to be reducing the movement of people and their incentive.
It's now time for the Business Minute.
Industry and Commerce Minister Albin Hill is urging a review of how earnings from export is calculated locally. Mr. Hill said the country is already exporting services in a number of areas.
Tourism and the BPO, Global Digital Services, I am working with the Ministry of Finance, PS Templar, make sure I follow up with this formal letter to the Minister of Finance. I want to see the earnings from tourism and the global digital services calculated in our export.
Statin says as at January this year, Jamaica earned $325 million from exports. On the international scene, grocery prices in the U.S. stayed somewhat steady in June. According to the latest consumer price index released Wednesday by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, grocery prices went up only 0.1%. In the past year through June, food prices went up by 5.7%. And that's it for the Business Minute. I'm Raquel Porto.
Time now for the top regional and international stories.
In the region, Cuba's government on Tuesday called the presence of a U.S. nuclear-powered submarine at the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base for several days last week a provocative escalation. However, U.S. officials say that it was a logistics stop by the vessel at a U.S. base on its way to maritime exercises. A U.S. defense official said the Navy submarine made a scheduled logistics stop at Guantanamo Bay. It then continued south to participate in UNITAS, the world's longest-running multinational maritime exercise. The submarine was at the U.S. naval base on the island from July 5 to July 8. On the international scene, a new study by the National Oceanography Center and the UK and MIT shows 56% of the world's oceans have changed color in the last 20 years, specifically noting waters in the tropics close to the equator are now greener. It concluded that human-caused climate change is likely responsible. The findings are based on analysis of 2 decades of ocean color data. And those are the top regional and international stories. I'm Kerry-Ann Simpson.
We head to a quick break. When we come back, we'll have your midday sports report with Spencer Darlington.